Hey guys, happy Saturday. Got this male sideswipe here with me for today's video. One of the things that I see all the time in different social media platforms and people always ask is, what's the one thing you wish you knew earlier or in the beginning? Or what's the one piece of advice that you have for somebody starting out? I think the biggest thing, first of all, is don't be looking for just one piece of advice when you're starting out. As far as what you wish you knew, at some point, chances are along the way, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to wish that you knew how to avoid making that mistake. So it's going to be different for each and every person, but I thought I'd make a video going over some of the things that I wish I had known sooner, and then maybe some of the things that I would offer for advice to somebody just starting out. So probably the biggest thing that I wish I had known when I started out, we're talking early 2000s, around like 2002, I wasn't aware of caging options and heating options and all these different things, which is why you'll notice a lot of the subjects that I cover on the channel kind of have to do with that kind of stuff. I did a video on heating options and how they work and things like that. I didn't know all that. So yes, we had the internet when I started, so that was an advantage to some extent. But we didn't have the plethora of resources on there that we do now. There were king snake forums and the fauna, forums and stuff like that. And I don't even know if those were around that, or fauna was around that early. I think it was. But those were resources that we had, but we didn't have, now you go in a Facebook group and ask a question and you have 100 answers, which is good and bad, because you get a lot of wrong answers too. There's a lot of people giving advice that shouldn't be, and there's a lot of people that, kind of pound their chest the loudest, and so people think that they know what they're talking about, but really they don't. That's why I always urge people, and I have done as much on the channel to look into the people that you're getting advice from and seeing what their personal experience is. A lot of people like to quote other people's experience and parrot information. And when you haven't experienced that stuff yourself, you don't necessarily understand it the same way. Now, somebody that's been keeping for a long time, a lot of species, things like that, sometimes they can apply information to other things without necessarily having the hands-on. But people that are just starting out are not able to do that because they don't have anything to equate it to and to work with. But definitely caging was a big one, because like most people when I started out, I shouldn't say most people, but I think it is, I started out keeping in fish tanks, and fish tanks can work for certain species. They just don't work for a lot of the stuff that I keep. And so my first few years of keeping were, very tiresome, headaches, and why do I keep having this issue? Why is this snake not eating? And you see all the stuff, put the clutter in, put this in, put that in, and that's all well and good, but you're just band-aiding, an open gash. It doesn't really do anything. It's not necessarily hurting, but it's not helping to ultimately solve the problem. So figuring out and learning, probably about 2006 or 2007 is when I, was introduced to tub setups and racking systems and caging and all this other stuff. And it was a whole new world, and it was really exciting for me because I took these animals out of these environments that weren't right for them and I put them into environments that were, and the changes were night and day on everything from behavior to how the animals looked to, their activity levels, to their food response, to their, interaction got better because now they're more comfortable in their environment. And that's probably the single biggest piece of advice I can give you is don't put your personal feelings into what you're using for your enclosure. Do what's going to be best for the animal. And that's going to be different across different species. Bloods and shorttails, I don't think you can beat tubs. I don't think there's anything out there that's better for them. Obviously, as long as it's done right, of course. You can do other caging options and custom caging options, but I just don't find that they feel the same behind glass that they do behind something where they feel less exposed. Even in the PVC caging where three sides aren't glass, they're still a different animal than they are when they're in a tub. personality wise, interaction wise, behaviorally, everything's just different. And I don't think you could find anybody out there that's used both with an open mind that would find any different. Now, sometimes you might take an animal from a tub, put it in a cage, and it might do better. I'm not saying that that can't happen. But by and large, I think most people would tell you that these guys just seem to do better in the tub environment. And, you know, obviously an appropriate size tub is important. There are large snakes that get too big to where that's not really appropriate. And then you have to explore other options. But I think trying to mimic that tub-like environment in a custom cage is probably your best bet at that point. You know, I don't know what's available commercially that's good. If you do have to use glass, you can tint it, and that helps. I'm kind of getting way off topic here. You know, I should be just touching on things briefly. But yeah, caging made the biggest single step up in what I was doing. How successful I was definitely getting these animals into caging where they're more comfortable. It just changes everything about the relationship you have with them, changes everything about their health, about their well-being, both mentally and physically. So like I said, you know, it's going to depend on the species that you're keeping, what's going to be best for them. So I can just tell you what's best for what I keep and give you some ideas on other stuff. Like for instance, you know, my big female white lip, I wish they made a tub big enough for her because she'd probably be a lot more comfortable in there, but she's way too big of a snake to ever be in a tub. So that's why she's in a cage. But she's constantly striking the glass at me. She hates seeing me. You know, obviously I had her out the other day. I was able to handle her outside of that environment where she's outside of her zone. But I do think our relationship would have improved quicker if I was able to keep her in something like that. It's just not feasible for a snake her size, or it shouldn't be. I know some people do, but it's not fair. So other things, definitely biggest piece of advice I can give you is focus on equipment before animals. Get yourself set up properly, get yourself the right equipment in every aspect, from your thermostats to your caging to your, you know, temp guns, your hooks, everything you need, have before you start acquiring animals if you can, or before you start acquiring more animals. It's super, super easy to get overwhelmed. It's super easy, especially starting out. Let's say you buy a bunch of babies. It's really easy to house a dozen baby Bloods and Shorttails. It's not so easy to house a dozen adults. So you go from needing one little tiny rack, and it's easy and it's low maintenance, and yeah, they go to the bathroom a lot and make a mess, and you're, you know, cleaning 12 tubs every 2 days. Sure, but they're small tubs. They only take you, you know, a minute to clean. You know, hit them with like 30 seconds of contact time and wipe them out depending on what chemical you're using or cleaner you're using. You know, you might be leaving it in there for minutes, whatever. But, you know, that's real easy. But once you get into the adult space, now you're talking about 12 4x2s, 4x3s, 5x3, 5x2, whatever it is that you're doing. It takes up a lot more space, a lot more time, a lot more energy to heat it and keep it properly. Just everything becomes more and more. And, you know, I see people too often thinking, well, I can just get this down the road. I can just get this down the road. I have a year, I have 2 years. That time comes up on you so fast. Even for me, you know, and I'm preaching this stuff and I do try to stay prepared. I'm still at a point right now where it's tough shifting stuff around to accommodate everything that's growing so fast. I had this plan in my head that I thought was going to work, and it didn't work. So now I have to regroup and refigure and recalculate and shift things a little bit differently in order to make what I thought in my head was going to work. You know, God forbid I had pulled out a tape measure and actually measured, and then I would have known it wasn't going to work, at least the way that I intended it to. But I just eyeballed it like, yeah, that'll be fine. No. So learn from that. There's a piece of advice. Take the time and you know, make the right decisions and look at everything from every angle you can. Patience is something that, you know, people either have or don't. You can learn patience to a certain degree, but if you are not a patient person, this can be a really, really tough hobby for you, because snakes, everything is slow. Everything is slow. If they get sick, they heal slow. If they, you know, if they eat, they digest slow. They move slow. You know, by and large, there are exceptions. But you really have to have patience, especially if you're going to get into breeding. Everything feels like it takes forever, especially when it's a really anticipated clutch, or really, you know, maybe it's your first clutch. That weight is killer. You need to have hobbies. You need to find things to occupy your time, keep your mind on something else, because if all your mind is on is that, you're going to go absolutely insane. Um, it depends on the species you're doing. You might be looking at, 30 days to 6 months with snakes, lizards, whatever, depending on what you're doing. Like, I don't think I would ever have the patience to do monitors. 6 months of incubating eggs, I would absolutely go bullshit ballistic, which I guess is why a lot of monitor people also have other things going on, maybe stuff to kind of keep them occupied outside of that. But I know these guys, it's like 60, 65 days and it drives me crazy. So I can't imagine, even retics are up north of 70 most of the time. So you need a lot of patience. And that's just from the time you get eggs. Forget from ovulation until, shed, to laying, to hatching, to the baby's feeding, to the baby's ready to go. It's a long process. That's why breeding is pretty much a year-round thing. People think of it as, breeding season. And there is a breeding season, but there's a season prepping for breeding season. There's breeding season. Then there's egg season, and then there's hatching season and dealing with babies and getting them ready. And by the time they're out the door, you're already started on the next year most of the time, depending on, how soon your females go and things like that. Or with the situation that's going on now with the shipping, you're still sitting on babies from last year and this year. So that can happen. I think another thing that people don't really prepare themselves for is failure. Everybody, wants to succeed, and everybody has this vision in their head of how things are going to go. And then one or two things go wrong and derail that vision, and you get lost. So I think understanding that failure can be a part of your success. And as I've said in the past, I'm not saying to go out and fail intentionally. I'm just saying eventually it's inevitable. It's going to happen to everybody. You're going to fail at something. Maybe not a catastrophic failure, but you're going to fail at something. And so being prepared and understanding that that's a part of the process and how to learn from that and build from that is a really important quality in being a good snake keeper, breeder, whatever it is, really with anything. If you fail once and give up, it just doesn't work. There's a lot of things we wouldn't have accomplished as people if that's how everybody thought. So it's really important that you keep on it and you keep learning and you keep your mind open. And if you're just starting out, don't be looking to give advice at all. Just don't even get involved with it. Have your mentors or people that you trust and pass people off to them. Wait until you get your feet wet. Wait until you have 5 years and, at least like a dozen snakes before you're, really out there giving advice. Because the fact is, what works for you may not work for somebody else. And if you have limited experience, you can't possibly understand all the variables and things that are going on. Even from me, there's times where I pass people off to someone else because it's above where I feel comfortable giving them advice, or I'll seek advice from somebody before I give the advice that I think. I want to check and make sure, it's coming from the right place and it's going to be the right course of action, because it's really hard. You're not there, you're not hands-on with these people's animals, and they're asking you to tell you how to deal with a situation or how to do something. And you've got to take what information they're giving you, try to fill in the blanks of what they might be leaving out without realizing it, and then trying to analyze all the variables. It would be nice if every single animal is going to react to everything the same way, but it just doesn't work that way. They all have different personalities. They all have different physical attributes, different genetics, different things going on. One might be predisposed to something that another's not. So the conditions that might be perfect for one may not be perfect for the other. For variables that can range from all kinds of things. So it's definitely, don't be looking to give advice until you have a really, really solid base of stuff. I think that's the biggest mistake that new keepers make and it's not a mistake of, some people it is ego, but a lot of people I just think it's genuinely trying to be helpful, but you're actually doing more harm than good most of the time, because if you do give a person that advice and they do follow it and something goes wrong, now you're stuck. You don't know how to troubleshoot that. And then there's responsibility that falls on you there because you told them to do that. And yeah, it's not like you're gonna get sued or something like that, but you should feel responsible and should feel terrible about that. I know on the flip side, when you do get to that point and you are able to help people, it feels really good. Not from an ego standpoint, because I'm not that type of person, but it's awesome to see someone excited about their animal that maybe was frustrated and now they're enjoying interaction more, or now they're enjoying keeping more, or they were on the fence about whether they wanted to keep, and now, you know, they're reinvigorated. And so I think that's an awesome place to be, and I understand why people want to do that, because it does feel good and it feels awesome. But definitely wait until you're ready there so that you don't do more harm than good. I'd also love in the comment section if people wanted to talk about the pieces of advice that you wish you knew when you started out. Was there something or some things that, you know, you didn't find out until later that could have really helped you or would have made life easier, or whatever it is for you or your animal? So I would love to hear that. Learning about frozen thawed prey was definitely another big thing for me. You know, I never was fond of feeding live. You know, I'm an animal person, so watching an animal suffer is not something that I enjoy. I don't understand why people do enjoy that at all. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, watching a natural predator in the wild, you know, have that chess match and hunt their prey, I mean, that's intriguing and interesting, and I still feel bad for the prey, but that I will sit there and watch much more than, you know, essentially a canned hunt with a snake in a cage where the prey can't get away and, you know, it's at a huge disadvantage. It's just not the same thing. Then it's just sad. There's none of that excitement there. So definitely that was another thing that really made a difference in my keeping, is not having to deal with live prey unless I wanted to. And you know, obviously the ability to store 3 months of food at a time instead of having to go, you know, every so many days depending on which animals you're feeding and when, or having to sit on live food that they didn't eat and having to house that, and now you have another animal to care for that you didn't necessarily want. So that was definitely a big game changer for me too. And you know, ever since I've known about that, that's how I've fed, you know, 95% of my animals. All of my animals that I have personally are on frozen thawed. You know, obviously babies I start off on live and transition, so that's where that other percentage comes from. And then occasionally I might do pre-killed if I have stuff that I, you know, bred and I need to get rid of. But anyways, hit the comments, let me know. I'm going to cut this short so it doesn't get too long. It's already longer than I intended, which happens all the time. Don't forget too, I still have stickers if anybody's looking for them. I don't have a ton left that I want to get rid of because I'm trying to hand them out with snakes, but I do have some more available, so let me know if you're interested in those. You can message me on Instagram or on Facebook. Don't message the account that has my name and then alt behind it. That is my alt account. I don't ever use it unless I have to. I probably check it like once a month randomly, and there's always messages on there from people that I don't see. So message my main account if you're gonna do that, which is the Danage one. And I know that name is really stupid, but it's a long story for those that don't know. Just trolling somebody that deserves it. We will see you guys later. Have a good weekend.